The blissful retreat is a wound of orange and ash against the skyline. Roof tiles collapse into the white heat of the inferno. Parting tears, the vintage of a 16-year piece, now feeds the fire, the scent of fermented plum and burning cedar heavy in the air. A woman stands steady amidst the smoke. A child runs into the dark. A red scarf disappears over the mountain ridge. To the casual observer, this is a tragedy. A village razed, a childhood extinguished. But Qinghe is not a chronicle of what happened. It is a meditation on what it means. Look past the flames. This is a vast, breathing landscape of river valleys and jagged mountain passes, long forgotten by the capital. Heaven's Pier was but one quiet knot in this sprawling fabric. A hearth where the wider turbulence of the realm was, for 16 years, held at bay. Throughout China's long history, dynasties rising, dynasties falling, and everything between, the answer has always been the same. When the court fails, the Jianghu begins. The martial world is not a rebellion. It is the shadow government of a broken empire. It is how a culture teaches itself to survive without a center. Most stories treat a collapse like an ending. But here, collapse is just a transfer of weight. When the capital forgets you, when officials stop coming and laws become rumors, the world does not become lawless. It becomes personal. This is what disorder means. Not chaos, but decentralization. The work of order does not disappear. It moves into kitchens, clinics, and classrooms. It becomes the bond between master and disciple. It becomes a child's courage, a woman's exhaustion, a man's blade. The throne is gone, but its labor remains. And the Jianghu is where that labor is carried. Heaven's Pier didn't burn because it was weak. It burned because it was holding the wrong kind of peace. It was a political machine wearing the mask of tragedy, and every soul within its walls is a distinct answer to the same question. When the state fails, what does order look like? To understand the lore of Qinghe and the ash-choked ruins of the blissful retreat, we cannot stay in the present. We cannot merely look at the flames and see an end. Systems are not built in abstractions. They are built in moments. To understand how Heaven's Pier burned, we have to return to the moment it was first protected, in a bamboo forest that history never learned the name of. That is where the architecture of this silence began. That is where a man chose to disappear. 16 summers ago, Wulang stood in the emerald twilight of a bamboo forest. He was not just a man in hiding. He was a man fleeing a name, his own. A name that had once moved armies and invited massacres. In that swaying silence, as the sunlight was filtered into thin golden needles by the leaves, he looked at the child wrapped in coarse cloth and the blood still cooling on his own iron. He realized that for the child to live, the man's history had to die. He understood that a name is a death sentence if the world knows who you are supposed to be. To save the boy, he performed a ritual of erasure. He discarded his title and his past, letting them sink into the forest floor until he was nothing but a shadow among the stalks. In the world of the blade, a name is everything. It is currency, it is gravity, it is the thread by which history pulls you into its weave. But Jiang Wulang understood a more ancient, structural truth. To have a name is to be a target. Most masters teach their disciples to hide their power, to conceal the edge until the moment of the strike. But Wulang's gift to the boy was something far more radical. He did not teach him to hide his strength. He taught him the art of the nameless. This is not the art of the sheath. It is the art of refusing legibility. The nameless sword he taught the boy was not born of theory. It was born of that survival. It is a technique designed to produce no narrative. It possesses no signature, no recognizable rhythm, no flourish that a storyteller could capture. It is a civilizational heresy. In the classical order, a name is not merely a label. It is a place in the world. To be named is to be bound, to duty, to lineage, to the ancestral inscriptions that define a human life. By refusing the name, Wulang was not just hiding the boy from violence. He was stepping outside the mandate itself. Because Wulang knew that in a time of disorder, to be measurable is to be consumed. The moment you enter the ritual economy of society, the moment you are ranked or known, you become a gear in the machinery of violence. Jiang Wulang did not hide his edge. He removed himself from the geometry that gives authority its grip. This is the first mode of order, governance through invisibility. For 16 years, Heaven's Pier was a sanctuary not because it was strong, but because it was illegible. No banners passed through the valley, for there was no great house to acknowledge. No messengers arrived with decrees, for there was no subject to receive them. Even the tax collectors seemed to forget the road, not because it was hidden, but because there was no ritual hook for their authority to grab onto. And for a time, the silence was perfect. The blissful retreat poured its wine. The boy lived a life that was uncounted. Ruby's laughter was a sound that history didn't bother to record. It was a beautiful, fragile stasis, an order maintained by the sheer will of staying worthless in the eyes of the ambitious. But silence, like debt, eventually compounds. The nameless is a debt that must eventually be paid. Non-existence is not safety. It is borrowed breath. Wulang knew that the world eventually finds a name for everything. That is why he vanished, leaving the boy behind with a blade that had no story and a childhood that was finally being written into the ledger of the flame. He did not leave to seek a legend. He left because the vacuum of his absence was the only thing left that could protect the boy from the weight of being known. The first law of the world: be uncounted, be unrecorded, and pray that history forgets you exist. For 16 years, Wulang's law of non-existence held the world at bay. Life in Heaven's Pier was a fragile stasis, an era of borrowed breath where the mountains kept their secrets and the children were allowed to remain children. In this quiet pocket of the world, there was Ruby. She smells of pine nut soup and woodblock ink. To the villagers, she is the mischievous partner in crime to the boy. To the boy, she is the twin hero who calls him boss. Ruby doesn't know about the politics of the state or the architecture of collapse. She knows the stories. She devours woodblock chronicles of the great masters, convinced that the Jianghu is a place of grand rewards, secret techniques, and fated meetings. She once told you that when you became a great hero, she would be the one who held the horse. To Ruby, the Jianghu was a game they were playing together. She is the original, unspent humanity of a world that hasn't yet taught her how to be afraid. Then, the veil of the Nameless punctures. The aureate pavilion descends, bringing a spatial nightmare, the illusion array. The valley is no longer a home. It is a cage of smoke and warped perception where every escape route leads back to the blade. To break the spell, the survivors need a beacon. They need someone to ascend Moonveil Mountain and pierce the dark. In the village's most desperate hour, Ruby does not step forward to be a martyr. She steps forward to be useful. She acts from the simple, radiant logic of the chronicles she loves. Signals save people, and friends help friends. The boy tries to hide her. He ties her up, trying to force Wulang's silence upon her one last time. But Ruby, fueled by the belief that this is what twin heroes do, swaps places with another child, and escapes into the night. She reaches the peak of Moonveil Mountain and waves her red scarf against the firelit sky. In that moment, a haunting transformation occurs. She ceases to be a child and becomes a geography of hope. She becomes the signal. There is a cruel physics to this role. The lighthouse is never the ship. She stands perfectly still, a stationary point of defiance, while the world moves around her. She does not think of the archers leveling their bows. She thinks of the villagers finding the road. She stands there because she is the only one left who still believes the world is kind enough to let her hold the lantern. "They are merely ants," the enemy whispers, watching that small, defiant flicker on the ridge. When the arrows find her, the light does not just stop. It is stolen. Her death is the era's greatest theft, not because it was heroic, but because it was necessary. The system needed visibility, and it took the brightest thing it could find to pay the toll. Ruby is the light that guides the village to safety, the proof that even in the heart of disorder, the spirit of the Jianghu still breathes. She held the flame so others could live, never realizing that in a world of predators, the light that shows the way is the same light that draws the hunter. The signal on Moonveil Mountain was a singular, violent burst of hope. But hope is a luxury that requires a foundation. If Ruby's death was the sudden, jagged fracture of the present, then Aunt Han was the hidden architecture that had held the floor beneath her feet for 16 years. Ruby's sacrifice was only necessary because a hidden system had finally reached its limit. The fire that consumed the child was the same fire that had been smoldering beneath the village for a generation. To walk away from the mountain is not to move to a new story. It is to see, for the first time, the invisible labor that made Ruby's childhood possible. Ruby's death is not only the loss of innocence. It is the moment the hidden machinery of care finally becomes visible. For a child to grow up smelling of pine nut soup while the world outside is a graveyard, someone must surgically separate the garden from the chaos. Beneath the physician's clinic, the boy descends into a dry well and discovers the true cost of his peace. In a hidden cavern, he finds the Faceless Ones, warriors of a failed revolution who surrendered their identities to become the village's silent immune system. They are more than hollowed souls. They are Aunt Han's living ledger of guilt. They are the survivors of a dream she once shared, the bodies she could not save from a great righteousness that demanded everything and gave nothing back. At the heart of this abyss stands the surgeon, Aunt Han. To view the woman who tended the boy's scrapes as a secret master is to miss the tragedy of her role. Aunt Han is not authority. She is maintenance. She represents the weary principle of sustaining the pattern. In the wake of a fallen empire, she is what the state looks like after it has died. She does not issue edicts. She performs the invisible, repetitive labor that keeps entropy at bay. But her care is not born of idealism. It is born of resignation. Aunt Han was once Han Xiangshun. She loved Chu Qingtren, a man who chose the path of the great hero and was destroyed by it. He died for the world. She survived to pick up the pieces. She is the first character in Qinghe to consciously reject the Jianghu. Her philosophy is a silent, bitter rebellion against the hero's narrative. If I could go back, I would never have let him leave. She does not maintain Heaven's Pier because she believes in a cause. She maintains it because she no longer believes in anything but the survival of the people she has left. She is the infrastructure of order. Courts may create law, but Aunt Han creates normality. She weaves illusions so the broken may sleep. She manages the community's memory so the trauma of the past doesn't drown the present. This labor is a fire that must be constantly fed, and the fuel is her own life. There is a profound difference between protection and safety. Safety is a right provided by stable times. Protection is an active, expensive performance of will. For 16 years, Heaven's Pier was protected, but it was never safe. Aunt Han absorbed the systemic costs that a functioning state would normally carry. She held the lantern steady while the wind howled, allowing a child to live as if there were no storm at all. This is why her eventual collapse is so devastating. When she tells the boy, "I am taking you away from this life," it is not merely systemic fatigue. It is terror. She has already lost a lover, a generation of friends, and a revolution. She refuses to lose the boy to the same machine. Her collapse is the moment the hidden sovereignty of the village, the only thing that allowed Ruby to be a child, simply runs out of strength. Aunt Han's rebellion against the Jianghu was sustainable only in the margins. She could hold the world together with care, but she could not stop it from moving. When the ceiling of maintenance finally breaks, the world does not become kinder, it becomes faster. Where she builds shelter, he becomes the storm wall. Where she preserves, he answers. Where she delays the collapse, he absorbs it with his own body. Aunt Han tried to outlast the Jianghu. Yidao does not resist it. He becomes it. If Aunt Han was the last institution, then Yidao is what exists after institutions are gone. He is the Jianghu wearing a human face, the atmospheric pressure that makes injustice unstable, and the blood that pays for a cup of wine when the currency of the realm has failed. This is what happens when order has no time to exist. He does not consider justice. He is simply the consequence of its absence. His authority is born of recognition, not law. He speaks of Qinghe, the man who once hunted him across the empire in a pursuit that should have ended in a duel. But when they finally met in a storm of blood, they saw a greater wrong before them. Without a single word of negotiation, they turned their blades in the same direction. There was only a shared, primal instinct, the understanding that even in the dark, one honest blade knows another. In the burning vault of the pavilion, this ritual reaches its conclusion. The air is thick with the weight of a world changing hands. The boy does not weep. Instead, he reaches for the jars with a reckless, hollow laugh, the laughter of someone who has seen the end of the world and found it wanting.
Jars of 10-year parting tears wine. My treat, Blade!
Bottoms up! Cannot erase!
Then, the gravity shifts. The air grows cold despite the fire.
You haven't seen the Jianghu yet. Regret it now?
I have seen it. You, Qinghe, still sure. Is that not the Jianghu?
Yidao does not answer. For the first time, the killer blade is seen not as a weapon, but as the world itself. He does not smile. He recognizes. He does not sacrifice. He fulfills. With a thrust of his fire stick, a shove like thunder against the boy's chest, the weight of history is transferred. The boy is thrown back into the dark, into breath, into the future. In that same motion, the enemy's steel finds its home. Yidao does not retreat. He leans into the blade, anchoring the world in place with his own bone, and hurls the spark into the wine. Parting tears ignites like a sea of falling stars. The vault turns to white daylight. The last thing the boy sees is not a martyr, but a monument. Yidao standing in the flames, not falling, not kneeling, just standing. If you still don't know what the Jianghu is, he is it. He is the habit of justice, the muscle memory of a falling civilization, and the iron certainty that even when the state is dead, the spirit of the blade remains. And finally, we arrive at the threshold of everything. We arrive at the point where every road in Qinghe terminates and every road into the future begins. Everything you have seen, Wulang's silence, Ruby's light, Han's care, and Yidao's instinct, was not merely a sequence of tragedies. It was a preparation. It was the world assembling the components of its last, desperate answer. We do not arrive here at a character. We arrive at the convergence. We arrive at us. The fifth law of disorder is a verdict. Heroes are not chosen, they are drafted. In the burning vault, as the wine fire turns the air into gold, that scream wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a detonation. In that moment of ignition, the boy stops seeing the Jianghu as a destination and starts seeing it as a wound. He realizes that every mentor he ever loved was not just a person, but a function. They were the armor, the beacon, the shield, and the blade. And now, the era has run out of bodies. It has called his name to fill the void they left behind. This is the birth of the Shao Sha, the young hero. He is not the great hero, Da Sha, who stands with the weight of wisdom. He is an unshaped blade, heated in the furnace of heaven's peer and hammered by the loss of everything he knew. He is not authority. He is unresolved force. He carries a responsibility that has arrived decades too early, a weight that a boy must now carry because an entire civilization failed to protect it. As the smoke clears, the boy walks away from the ruins of his childhood. To history, he no longer has a name, but he carries Ruby's red cloak into a world that has suddenly grown vast, cold, and indifferent. He is not entering a system. He is becoming the motion that keeps the world from freezing. This is the final mode of order, synthesis. The boy is the point where the winds meet, the intersection of Wulang's invisibility, Ruby's light, Han's care, and Yidao's instinct. He is the first spark of a new era, trembling with potential and heavy with a promise he hasn't yet learned how to keep. The story of Qinghe does not end here. It has simply been forced open. He is the wind that moves when all other structures have failed. The living proof that in the heart of disorder, the only thing that remains is the one who refuses to stop moving. Where winds meet, the blade is finally struck.